You're listening to Life Inspirations. Wisdom for Dummies. There's a book series that started in the early 1990s that many of you would be aware of. There were Something for Dummies books that had iconic yellow and black covers featuring the Dummies man caricature. The first one out was DOS for Dummies, and what followed was phenomenal. More than 2,500 unique titles have been published, with more than 200 million books in print in over 30 languages. And the idea is that they're self-education books, and they're set up to be purchased by people like you and me who wish they knew more than they do about a particular subject. Here's a few titles: Bird Watching for Dummies, Desserts for Dummies, Fishing for Dummies, Investing for Dummies, The Internet for Dummies, Law for Dummies, Parenting for Dummies, Sailing for Dummies, and on the titles went. So how come they're so effective? One satisfied customer said, "I buy them because they take the intimidation out of the learning process. Whatever the subject matter, they spell it out to me in simple terms. They make the complex understandable so that even a regular guy like me can get it." And it seems like the writer of the book of Proverbs in the Bible knew this principle, King Solomon, along with a few other writers. He was one of the wisest kings who ever lived. Proverbs takes the ageless, priceless wisdom of God himself and makes it understandable and accessible to regular people like you and me. And understanding its wisdom doesn't require a university degree. You see, the book has a real lack of confusing theological terms. It's the most down-to-earth book in the Bible, containing truths for everyday life. They really are accessible by everyone. They really do tell us how life works. And if you were looking for an overview of Proverbs, generally speaking, it refers to people who are godly, moral, hardworking, and wise, and that they'll reap many rewards. So how did the writers know this? They learned it from a lifetime of experience. So we're tapping into experience here. They were fallible people like us who walked with God and pursued his wisdom. They mucked up at times and learned a few hard knock lessons from that. They observed the successes and failures of others and wrote down their discoveries in order to share them with others, including us in our day. And it has practical advice. For example, in chapter 20, verse 4, it says, "A sluggard does not plough in season, so at harvest time he looks but finds nothing." In other words, if you don't plough, you don't eat. Any questions? Here's another one. "The Lord abhors dishonest scales, but accurate weights are his delight." You see, the Lord hates cheating and loves honesty. It's very, very clear. And there's a great set of verses for those who overindulge in booze. Proverbs 23, 29 to 35. "Who has anguish? Who has bitter sorrow? Who constantly complains and argues? Who stumbles and falls and hurts himself? Who's the one with bloodshot eyes? It's the one who drinks too much and is always looking for a brew. Make sure it's never you. And don't be drunk with wine, but be known as one who enjoys the company of the lovers of God. For drunkenness brings the sting of a serpent, like the fangs of a viper, spreading poison into your soul. It will make you hallucinate, mumble, and speak words that are perverse. You'll be like a seasick sailor, being tossed to and fro, dizzy and out of your mind. You'll awake only to say, 'What hurt me? I feel like I've been run over by a truck.' Yet off you'll go looking for another drink." It's not only practical, but it's actually quite funny at times and humorous, along with a reasonable depth. So the question here is, what is wisdom? So when you look at it from a scriptural point of view, it's actually understanding life from God's perspective, rather than merely acquiring intellectual knowledge. And it's defined as a gift from God, deeply rooted in the reverence or fear of the Lord. And in the New Testament, it's embodied by Jesus Christ himself. If we're looking for a list of words that can describe wisdom, it's discerning, judicious, prudent, sensible. Of course, they're not very glamorous words, but words you can build a life on. And so the first 9 chapters of Proverbs form an introduction to the remaining 22 chapters of the book, but they present the central message of Proverbs, which is this: pursue wisdom, run after it. And they're spoken or written in the context of warm fatherly advice, giving instructions to his sons and building a case for the lifelong pursuit of wisdom. And there's a bit of a plea in there: do not forsake my teaching. Listen, my sons, to my instructions. Pay attention, get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forsake wisdom. It's supreme, therefore get it. Though it cost all you have, get understanding. Accept what I say. I guide you in the way of wisdom. It's all in chapter 4. And then he tells them why. Because it pays off. Blessed, he writes, is the man who finds it, the man who gains understanding, for she is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold, more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. Wisdom is a tree of life to those who embrace her. Those who lay hold of her will be blessed. And so we're encouraged to arrange our lives around the goal of gaining wisdom. And the rewards that we get from that are far in excess of anything that can be imagined. So you think you want silver? Wisdom is better. You want gold? Wisdom is better. You think you want fame or fortune or achievement or power? Wisdom is much better. Nothing you desire can compare with her. I'll give you a few examples here. In Proverbs 15:20 it says, a wise son brings joy to his father and to his mother. One of the greatest joys as a parent is to have children who eventually walk in the paths of wisdom, who know how to deal with conflict, who handle relationships with maturity, who deal with money prudently. You can't put a price on that. And the chances are that they have come from a home of wisdom, where the parents, although not perfect of course, exhibit sound judgment in how they conduct their lives and raise their children. Fathers who know when to encourage and when to admonish. Mothers who know when to give advice and when to just listen, when to teach and when to let life's consequences be their children's teacher. Put a value on these things. It's very difficult to. And if you read Proverbs 17:6, it says, parents are the pride of their children. That's when the kids become adults and can often say, I grew up in a home with a very wise mother and father. Again, you can't put a price on that. Let's go to the workplace. In Proverbs 22 verse 29 it says, do you see a man skilled in his work? He will serve before kings. He will not serve before obscure men. Interesting verse, and it says in the Message, skilled workers are always in demand and admired. They are people who work wisely and skillfully over a long time. Now get this, they may not be big stars with dazzling talents or incredible credentials or charismatic personalities, but they may have risen to places of strategic importance in the marketplace, in government, in academia, in the non-profit sector, and even in the church. These workers, these people have gained responsibility and respect for one reason. They have handled themselves wisely in their workplace and stayed the distance. One of the incomparable benefits of pursuing wisdom is that it offers us a navigational system to keep us out of moral blind alleys and dead-end roads. Discretion will protect you and understanding will guard you. Wisdom will save you from the ways of wicked men, from men whose words are perverse, who leave the straight paths to walk in dark ways. It says in Proverbs 2:11-13. And also, pursuing wisdom is a very effective way of investing in the future. I don't know if you've thought of it like that. If you find it, there is a future hope for you, and your hope will not be cut off. Chapter 24, verse 14. So what sort of hope does wisdom offer us for the future? Well, undoubtedly hope for a future in heaven, of course, but I believe hope for a life that works here, today, in this world. And I believe that the wisdom of Proverbs, wisdom for dummies, if you want to put it that way, can make our lives work better. Proverbs gives us advice about diligence and self-discipline, about choosing what friends we have and dating partners, about establishing a healthy family life, about honouring God with our finances, about caring for our bodies, about growing spiritually, about caring for the poor and managing anger, and about nearly every other major issue in life. You may have heard the saying, wisdom shouts from the rooftop, and that's from Proverbs 1:20 to 22, and I want to read that out. Out in the open, wisdom calls aloud. She raises her voice in the public square. On top of the wall, she cries out. At the city gate, she makes her speech. How long will you who are simple love your simple ways? How long will mockers delight in mockery and fools hate knowledge? In other words, wisdom is everywhere if you want to pursue it. Public places and streets, in the marketplace, in our homes, in the library, in the lab, in the cafes. Wisdom is everywhere, and it's not confined or secluded or exclusive to certain situations. But the writers of Proverbs say the opposite of wisdom is foolishness, and the opposite of a wise person is a fool. What a word. In these days, the word fool often means someone with low intelligence, but in biblical usage, fools may have a high IQ and a reputation for success. What makes them fools is that they ignore God's wisdom, preferring to follow the shifting dictates of the crowd or their own fallible opinions. They lean on their own understanding rather than God's, and they can consider themselves clever, people who know how to beat the system, and they can get too clever, which can often lead to their ruin. They have a penchant for distorting the truth, and that's everywhere in our world today. Their lack of discernment and discipline, critical thinking, their unwillingness to exhibit self-control, and their apparent delight in throwing caution to the wind put them on a path to disaster. And that's why Proverbs has so many warnings, because it wants to save people who ignore God's wisdom to their peril. It's this other word called folly, and here it is. They will die for lack of discipline, led astray by his own great folly. Chapter 5, verse 23. The fool blurts out folly. Chapter 12, verse 23. The mouth of the fool feeds on folly. Chapter 15, verse 14. But understanding is a fountain of life to those who have it, but folly brings punishment to fools. Chapter 16, 22. Wow, doesn't mince any words, does it? And so Proverbs tells us to keep away from them. Better to meet a bear robbed of her cubs than a fool in his folly. Chapter 17, verse 12. So foolishness can become a habit by nature. As a dog returns to its vomit, so a fool repeats his folly. Chapter 26, verse 11. Though you grind a fool in a mortar, grinding him like grain with a pestle, you will not remove his folly from him. Chapter 27, verse 22. Wow. And you find that many of the Proverbs have like a parallel construction that compares the wise and foolish person. For example, the way of a fool seems right to him, but a wise man listens to advice. Chapter 12, verse 15. Or, a wise man fears the Lord and shuns evil, but a fool is hot-headed and reckless. Chapter 14, verse 16. Another one. A fool gives full vent to his anger, but a wise man keeps himself under control. Chapter 29, verse 11. And when you look at the words fool and folly, they're pretty severe. They cut to the chase. And really, when we're reading those words, we might be tempted to think of other people, but sometimes we all are foolish. Maybe some of us would say often we are. And it's really interesting because at this end of my life, every now and then, something that's happened in the past pops into my head and I cringe. And I think, was I really that stupid? And in Proverbs 22:15, it states unequivocally that folly is bound up in the heart of a child. So according to the Bible, human beings are not born with a blank slate. On the contrary, we come into the world with a definite bent towards foolishness. And when I was a tiny little boy, our family was on holiday, and I vaguely remember getting lost, and was lost in sandhills, and my family couldn't find me. Eventually they did, and they found me sort of half conscious, I think, with sand in my mouth. And when you think of a little child like that, sitting in maybe even a sandbox, the baby gets hungry. So you know what the little fellow will do? He grabs a handful or a fistful of sand and shoves it into his mouth. Doesn't ask himself it's wise to have sand for lunch. Just acting on impulse, lunging for whatever is around them. We all started out that way, and some of us continue that quite foolish, impulsive behaviour into adulthood. And we find that the foolish gratification of impulses will lead to a sick society. It leads to childish behaviour in adult bodies. And that's why there's so many tragedies that are around in our age. Actually, Proverbs tells us what to do about this childish behaviour. It says in the Passion Translation of Proverbs 22:15, although rebellion is woven into a young man's heart, tough discipline can make him into a man. And my encouragement to parents who have great challenges in this day and age in bringing up children is to not be afraid of loving discipline, because according to Proverbs, it can drive foolishness far from a child. And that's why I've said this is wisdom for dummies, because Proverbs says it's time for those who behave like this to grow up and follow the path of wisdom. God bless you.